Today, actually, let me start with the old sort of treatise or book on Japanese garden. But actually, this dates back to 11th century, actually, quite a long time ago. So a little bit about the books on Japanese garden. So this we call Sakuteiki, the treatise on the garden makings. And this is, I believe, it's the world's oldest document, anything to do with making of gardens. And then this is the first in the history and what we know of. There is quite few after, 13th century and 15th century, all the way until 18th century. There is quite few actually books on the gardenings in Japan. So obviously the Japanese is really the culture of garden making, so you can see that. So this is one of the book they say the Sakuteiki, and this is it's another book. Basically this is sort of compilation of two short actually the books, and the one is Sakuteiki is written in 11th century, the other one is the 14th century. So the Sakuteiki alone doesn't have any depiction or picture or anything. Basically, it's a text, that's all. And then the other one, the 14th century book, has a little more. Actually, you can see the depiction. So at this point, this is mid 15th century, basically. It's very specific how to incorporate the natural scene or how to mimic the natural scene and bring that into the garden settings. This book, at this point, the 15th century, the garden making, actually, the suggestions and the principles are very specific, actually. Type of stone, type of plants, how to arrange, and all those things are very precisely actually written. So the same thing, this is not the someone thinking and at the desk and drew this. This is definitely came from someone actually practice and building the garden, and this is more like a field note. What's interesting is what we know of the sort of the principles on making or designing the Japanese garden. It's already someone figured way back, 1,000 years ago. No surprise. So there's three basically the important principle and the beginning of this the book. The first, you consider and basically observe the settings, the land. Obviously, this is no-brainers. It's a common on any garden and landscape design. Basically, you work with the land. So that's they call this is the very first sentence. Basically, making the garden is consulting the land. That's exactly what it said. And then the second thing, this is very interesting, is the study the masters in the past. So obviously, back then already there was a gardens. This is the evidence that basically books talks about. You need to study and learn from the past masters. That means that there was already gardens out there. And so basically you need to study and learn from the masters who built the garden in the past. And then alongside that, it says that then with respect to and responding to the owner's request. This is very interesting. Of course, garden, you are building the garden for someone at someone's house. So respecting and understanding the owner's request, likes and dislikes, is an important part. So those are the second point. And third point, this is important. This is something we talk more a little bit later today. Is basically it says you remember the famous scenery of the country. Different region throughout Japan. There is a beautiful, for instance, rock formations, vegetations, forest, waterfalls, and shorelines, and all those things. So basically, you collect those ideas and the sort of design palette you create out of the natural scenes. Actually, you observe. So basically, what I do, for instance, now I'm in front of flat gardens and just can draw something, and then I can touch a little bit how this one relate to the natural scenery or the vice versa. In the meantime, so my sketch is not necessarily the sort of artistic sketch. I would say the design. So that means I am sketching, not necessarily creating the piece of art, but rebuilding my design vocabulary. So the sketch for us, the landscape architect and designers, is basically everything to do with we're building the archives and libraries of the ideas. And so sketch is really just one way to record that. So sometimes I just sketch as is. Sometimes I'll show you a little bit later. I'm looking at this and I'm going to basically draw the plan here. Because when we do the design, you need to go back and forth, three-dimensional, and then what you on the paper is oftentimes most designers draw the ideas on the plan view, meaning looking down straight. But the reality is what you see after you built the garden is this is how we see the garden. It's a three-dimensional perspective. And so two-dimensional design on the papers is, in a way, an artificial way to represent the three-dimensional, the garden at the end. So we do going back and forth. So in this case, I'm going to draw this garden in more like as if I'm flying over and looking down. So that gives me a better perspective of how these trees and the ground plane relate. And also that can be recreated into the three-dimensional when I do design another garden. So basically, this is not the perspective. This is I'm drawing this scene in two-dimensional way, as if I'm looking from up above. I'm in this one interested in where, for instance, pine trees are placed, and there's the little ones, and that's another one halfway. And there's a 1, 2, 3 on the tip. And there's a 1, 2, 3. So basically, these pine trees, conifer as opposed to deciduous. Again, this is a sketch to actually I'm building my idea archive. The key is this. This is almost like when you see the ocean, that there is a little peninsula comes out again and comes out from the ocean. So I believe this scene is the coastal, basically, scene. And obviously that's the pine trees, use of pine trees very much related to that, sort of recreating the coastline. And there's other islands, and the big islands is here. No vegetation here. And then there's a maple. And those pines, again, this is a design sketch, so I am trying to get the sort of spatial relationship of the trees. For instance, these trees are related, and these are singular. This is a Japanese maple. So I often, in this kind of sketch, I also put the notes to this is basically granite. And this is the small island. Pine trees. So this is the black pine. What I'm interested in is how the undulation and waves of the islands or coastline relate to the. So these are all. So again, what I'm sketching is really the spatial relationship of the object, and for later on, basically when I design the new garden, this will help how this in and out of the sort of the coastline. Perhaps this little portion could be more like a rocky shore, some stone arranged, and maybe some, and basically a series of 3-4 pines lining up this, and then the backdrop is tall standing pine trees creates. So this one, this is basically, it's the, we call 3 Torio pines. That's that. So anyway, so sometimes I just draw. This is really the one way to record this particular landscape. And again, when I'm drawing, not just looking at and then see the depth and height, but also I'm thinking about how the actual natural shoreline feels like in and out. So this is definitely the theme for this design is the coastline, you can see. And then pine trees basically standing, and it gives a sort of depth by creating the layers. Because you see the white sand and the mossy ground, and you can see a little bit of sand beach going in. Then another layer, so you can see the glimpse of the gravel back then. So this is a sort of, again, it's the ocean and the seascape, so to speak.